Hello, everyone. Firstly, sorry for the long wait in between episodes here. I've had a fairly busy couple months, but this will be the sort of completion of the main arc of the planet course. You can expect a couple more episodes covering various things branching off from it, like planetary rings and probably like a gas giant tutorial or something. Anyways, in this episode, we're going to be bringing the cloud VDBs that we simulated in Houdini over the last two episodes. We're going to be bringing those into Blender and rendering some pretty sweet scenes with them. So you can see them like right here. They're all these guys that, of course, would be very hard to do with just plain textures. If you didn't follow along with the last two videos, I have a pack of free VDBs linked down below in the description. These are these exact clouds, but they're the lower res versions, so they won't necessarily hold up in scenes like this with like that'll like have a very narrow field of view. But they should actually hold up pretty well for most like orbital shots, so you should be able to follow along pretty decently. And then the higher resolution versions are available on my Patreon. The full resolution versions are available on the $25 a month tier. And they're like super high res, like fill up your entire screen in a 4K render, like high res. They're pretty dope. Um, that might be overkill, but hey, yeah. And then the half res are on the $10 a month tier, and then the quarter res are on the $5 a month tier. Anyways, let's get into Blender. This is enough blabbering on by me. You guys just want to see some clouds, so let's do that. All right, everyone. So this is where we left off last time in Blender. We had our multiple different cloud layers contributing to that kind of depth that we wanted in our clouds. Today, of course, we're bringing VDBs, so let's first just pretty much hide everything in our scene. That way we can integrate the VDBs a bit easier. So I'm just going to hide all of those. And then I'm going to set the cursor to the origin. If you're using my cloud pack, if you're using the VDBs that you made from the tutorial last time, you know where they are and you know how to bring them in, I'm sure. But if you're using the cloud pack that I made, the clouds each have their own separate folder, and each of these has multiple different snapshots of the simulation, usually around 5 to 10 of them, and they each have their own subfolder. So you'll get different resolutions. The free version just has the 8th resolution one here, and that's what I'm going to be using today for our render. So I'm just going to click and drag it into our Blender scene. And you'll notice first and foremost that it's just huge. And that's because these are using the real world scale. So they're like, I don't know, like 50 to 100 kilometers across and like 10 kilometers high. But in our Blender scene for a planet, we are using 1/1000th scale, right? So we want to scale these down by a factor of 1,000. So I'm going to do S 0.001. And that way the cloud is only about 10 meters high. And that's important because there's this layer of the atmosphere. It's more of like a boundary between layers. Where we live is called the troposphere, right? That's below about 10 to 20 kilometers. Depending on where you are. And then above that is the stratosphere. And clouds have a very tough time existing in the stratosphere. So what will happen is they'll rise up and then they'll kind of get squashed down by the stratosphere, and then they'll kind of spread out. That's what gives us the anvil clouds formation that you often see. So we don't want our clouds here going above about 10 to 20 kilometers. So in this case, it's 10 to 20 meters. So we don't want them permeating past that. So let's enable our ground sphere as well, because we want to move these up to the ground. We don't want these to exist in the core of the Earth. Since our ground sphere has a radius of 6,000 meters, we're going to move these up by 6,000 meters. And let's do Shift S2, and let's just see how these look. Oh, we have to enable our sun. My bad. Brilliant. So I'm going to hop out of camera view and just preview this. So last time we did some cloud shading stuff. That was like 4 or 5 episodes back. I just kind of hand waved it and say, hey, go check out my previous video. But I'm going to spend some time here to construct a decent shader. So I'm going to start by just adding material here. And then deleting this and adding a volume scatter. And then a attribute node. And then in our data tab, so the object data properties, it's going to list our grids, and we want to use the density grid. And then I'm just going to connect the fact to the density, and we see that that does something. And I'm also going to change the color to be pure white. But if I enable the atmosphere, when we look at the back of our clouds, firstly, I'm going to preview this, and I'm also going to reduce the max steps for our volumes down 16 from 32, just to save a little bit of performance. Anyways, while this resolves, when we look at the backs of these clouds, we see that there's kind of like some ambient occlusion going on. Like they still look a little bit too smoky. So we're gonna do a very simple trick, which is using the light path node, and specifically the ray depth output, and then math node, set to power. Why is it doing that? Sorry, it just generated a bunch of errors. Then ray depth into the exponent, sorry. Then also a subtract, and set the value to 1. I'm going to set the base here to about 0.8. And then we're going to multiply this by that power. And you'll see very quickly it's kind of brightened up the backs of these clouds quite a bit. So these are now looking like properly cloudy. And then we also want to do a similar thing with the anisotropy. Clouds have a very high anisotropy. It's like about like 0.8 almost on the Henry-Greenstein thing. Realistically, you'd probably use me, but that's also like a very high anisotropy thing. And this can change depending on the cloud, of course. But like if you've looked up at night and seen like thin clouds around the moon, how there's just kind of this really small like halo of bright clouds around it. That's kind of the effect that we want. So, and that requires like pretty high anisotropy. But the reason why I'm using Henry-Greenstein instead of me is because we can optimize this very well. All right, so I'm going to duplicate the subtract node that we had here, and then set this to multiply. And the value here, I'm just going to put to be like 0.98 or something. And this is going in our anisotropy here. So I'm going to turn off the atmosphere, and I just want to show you why this is important. So when we look up, so this is just looking like at a very backlit cloud. Like so the sun, let's show the sun disk. Here we go. All right, so that's the sun right there. So we're looking almost directly at the sun. Let's just do that. So turn this off in the camera view. But if we decrease the exposure, you can see that it's very bright here. Meanwhile, before, let's just set this to 0. Yeah, it's very, very dark. So we're keeping the kind of structure of the clouds, but we're getting all of these nice effects for that. So let's turn the atmosphere back on to see how these look. I personally think they look quite solid. So let's set up our camera. And let's let's enable one of the cloud layers that we had previously. I'm going to first save our project. And then let's see. I think let's do the cirrus cloud. So I'm just going to rotate these a little bit just to get a neat little composition there. So you may be asking, how do I move these clouds around? And you could try and play around with like snapping, and that I guess would technically work. But my preferred method of doing this is just to set the 3D cursor to the world origin. And then we're going to press period and then set the origin to, or the pivot point to the 3D cursor. And from there, if we press R twice, we can rotate these around, which is well and good. So I'm just going to place this cloud a couple times around here. We don't want to use one cloud too many times, but this can be helpful just for getting a sense of the composition. But yeah, as I mentioned before, we can't duplicate one cloud around just to fill the entire scene. So it's good to have a couple in your back pocket. So to add another cloud here, we can just duplicate it, Shift D, not Alt D. And then up here in our data tab over here, we can just click this and we can add in a new cloud. So like maybe you want to add in a earlier version of this same cloud. That's a valid use. Or you could just add in another cloud over here. All right, let's grab. I'm just gonna grab this. I think I'm gonna use. So yeah, so there's a good balance of like these really small clusters of clouds and then these really big clouds that you should try to find. All right, so kind of matching up these small ones, having them feed into the bigger ones can create some really cool shapes, especially if you mind the sort of air currents, right? So like some of these have some directionality to them, right? Like they'll just be like streaks of clouds and stuff. So kind of trying to continue those flows as well as you can be a good idea. So something like that. Then maybe I want to add in a new cloud type. So I'm going to click that again. And then this time I'm just going to use the same clouds, but a little bit like further along in their simulation. So they're going to look a little bit bigger. And that should be enough to kind of differentiate them from these guys. And maybe I'll actually like swap places here. That way it's like small feeding into medium, feeding into big. I think that could be cool. Yeah, so there's like hardly any repetition there, which is a good thing. And yeah, I do like how this ended up. I'm gonna rotate this a little bit. Importantly, you notice I'm rotating around the y-axis. It's because Houdini is a y-up program and Blender is a z-up program, so the VDBs kind of import rotated. A little weird, um, which is strange. Kind of a little bit weird to work with, but it's not bad. So if you wanted, you could keep doing this and kind of construct this whole scene out of just the VDB clouds. That's actually like not a bad idea to do because for one, there's enough variation and kind of like just like 5 different cloud sets to cover the entire scene. Especially because of yeah, they each include their own like more than one frame of the simulation. That's a very valid way to do that. Um, that can be a little bit tedious though because there's just a lot of real estate over there. So my preferred method of doing this is again using the uh, textures to cover the bigger cloud structures, and then the VDBs kind of exist in the foreground, at least the smaller ones, to provide extra detail and because they hold up a lot closer than the texture maps do, as you can tell, right? Like these look pretty solid. But yeah, so I'm just gonna fill out the scene with these. By the way, I'm also holding down shift because as you just saw, like it's quite sensitive, but uh, shift, yeah, will slow it down quite a bit. It makes it quite manageable. So yeah, just grabbing a couple different clouds. Let's see, I'm gonna do this one. And I am just using the 8th resolution, the 1/8 resolution ones here, as you can see. Um, just to show that they do actually hold up very well um, in the scene. Although truth be told, for like a final render, if you're doing like 4K, you will probably want to have higher resolution ones for some of these. But yeah, like these will be totally fine. You'd never know the difference. So yeah, I'm just gonna kind of duplicate this around, create some interesting structures. And then you can also duplicate just patches of these. And yeah, so I'm just going to continue off of this. I think this is probably going to be a little bit too much like twinning for that, but that's probably fine. Like, I don't think anyone's gonna fuss about that. All right, so yeah, it's just laying out more of these, right? So just adding in more variations of these clouds. So I'm gonna duplicate this. Let's bring in do you want 11? Yeah, let's just do 11. 11 is fun. Notice how this is creating like a pretty interesting little arc. And then you'll kind of, if you use these VDBs more, you'll kind of get to know which ones look interesting together. That's a pretty neat little structure. I'm gonna enable the texture that we have for the lower cumulus and see how that one looks over here. Just gotta give it a second to update the images. Oh, looks like there's not much going on over here. Rotate this around. Let's just see how this looks. You kind of want to prevent the texture clouds from overlapping too much with the VDB clouds because the VDB clouds will definitely like outshine them. And that can create some weirdness. I think it's fine here. But like if you have like obviously realistic cumulus clouds and such, compared to just like really small texture cumulus ones, it can be a little bit strange. I think it works decently well here, and these do a decent enough job at like providing some little accents to it. But yeah, so these clouds over here, they look like quite lonely. So we're gonna want to add in some like support clouds or something over there. We definitely don't want any of our clouds to get lonely, um, because you know, yeah, it feels bad. Yeah, go Bob Ross with these clouds. So once you have uh one of like a couple like decent sized structures of clouds, you can totally just like spam them. Um, and they'll honestly look pretty good if you've taken the time to, yeah, just create cool looking cloud structures and such on a more macro scale. So I'm not a huge fan of how just empty this region is. So I think I'm going to place like some of these sparser clouds in there. I definitely want to give like the appearance of more of a cloud field look. That can be a little bit weird if you just have a patch of like zero clouds hanging out next to yeah, just like super dense patches of clouds. But I think, yeah, I mean this seems to work all right. I think it's time for me to add in another type of cloud again. So I'm going to grab another one of these cumulonimbus field 10s. This is going to just be one of the more late stage ones, so it's a little bit bigger. So that's like a more robust cloud field, I'd say. Just going to let it render out for a second because I'm curious to see how it looks. How are you guys doing today? Let me know in the comments or something if you're having a good day. So you can immediately see just like how much more character these have over just texture based clouds. And like you can do like really cool stuff with texture based clouds. In some ways, stuff that you can't even really do with these VDBs. But these are just an entirely other level of realism. Just it's kind of a different type of realism, honestly. And like if you include these, like there are these things and renders that are like I call them. I got this from a good friend of mine, Aaron Westwood. The 10% areas, just the areas that give you that extra last 10% of detail, and these will do that because if people can be like looking at your render, if they know how plants work, they're just gonna be like, oh yeah, it's just like a couple different cloud textures. Um, but if you have like so actual VDBs and stuff, it'll just make people go like, whoa, how did you do that? Or maybe this will become the new meta, and then everybody will be unimpressed by everything once again, as life usually is, unfortunately. So it's rendered out a little bit. Kind of happy with how it's looking. Uh, I do say. I do think over here quite empty. So let's just kind of take some of the stuff from over here and we can just bring it on over there. Again, don't have to be super precise about this. It's pretty hard to catch twinning in clouds just because there's so many of them. So I'm going to just select all of these. I'm going to move them into their new collection. I'm just going VDB. Just because these can sometimes be a little bit of a viewport performance hog, so it's good to be able to turn them off when we want. I'm going to enable the Alto Stratus layer, which is kind of the final layer that I had last time. And I'm just going to let it cook for a second. And I think this will be good for, yeah, just adding some extra character and breakup, especially in the back. Again, I don't really want them intersecting with the clouds too much. When cloud layers intersect, like when you have a cumulonimbus cloud pushing up through a like stratocumulus or whatever stratus cloud, um, usually there's a little bit more of like a complex thing happening there, because it doesn't just like pass right through. It'll like push it up a little bit. It's not. I don't actually think I've seen too many references of it, but it looks a little bit weird if you aren't careful. Um, like over here, for instance, it's kind of hard to see because it's pretty small, but like that's not going to look great in the render. There's just no kind of transition zone. It looks like a CG object clipping through something. So it's important to kind of mind the composition there. But these are no doubt quite good for a lot of different things. And if it's like a tiny little cloud like this, and just there's like a cloud that's poking through it, like that's fine. Yeah, I want to keep these somewhat isolated compositionally, or else you can get a little bit of weirdness happening. And you really don't want to be like doctoring these clouds too much in your render. It's just boring. Um, yeah, it's still happening a little bit here, but it's like broken up a bit, so it looks a little bit less strange. Like these clouds will hang around some cumulus clouds. It just, you can't have this penetrating like a very thick sheet of it, and have it look realistic. Like that, I think is probably fine, and same with that. So I'm gonna give this a render. Hello, editor Sam here. When rendering the thumbnail for this video, which is essentially just a higher resolution version of the uh, scene that we created in the video, I noticed some weird blocky artifacts over here. I was like, oh no, what's this? It's a very simple fix though. You just need to turn up your transparent bounces over here to something higher. I have it set to 32. They were previously at 8. And you can see here these blocky artifacts are no longer with us. Why does this happen though? So here's just a VDB. Uh, this is like the geometrical representation of your VDB. It's just a very closely fitting cage that's basically made up of boxes. The actual voxels themselves are, of course, higher resolution than this, but it's just made up of a bunch of boxes around those voxels. And then the rays have to intersect with each of these boxes. So if you have a ray coming from like down here that's traveling up this way, it's got to do a bunch of intersections to get there, and that can quickly exhaust your ray bounces, or your light bounces. So if you don't have enough of those, that can be troublesome. Anyways, hope that helps. Back to the video. Thank you very much for watching to this point if you have. Hopefully this has been interesting and a good journey for you. I have given you all of my knowledge on planets. What am I doing? I'm just being weird. I've given you all of my knowledge on planets. Actually, not yet, but it is pretty close. I really appreciate you following along. Yeah. So Discord is in the description. Clouds are in the description, although knowing most people, you've probably already picked them up by now. Yeah, I really appreciate your guys' viewership. Yeah, join the Discord. We've got a good community going there. It's a dedicated channel for this course where you can show off what you make, ask questions and stuff, because I'm not the greatest explainer and I've undoubtedly glossed over a few things. But yeah, that's it for the belabored uh, outro. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Bye.